Greetings and welcome to the Hope Recovery Podcast, hosted by Greg Schmalhofer. The Hope Recovery Podcast provides faith-based recovery messages to help you be successful in recovery and to grow in your faith as well. Hello and welcome to the Hope Recovery Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Schmalhofer, and this is episode number 30. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Hope Recovery Podcast. Today's episode is called The Most Important Relationship. In this episode, I want to look briefly at the importance of relationship and also at the importance of connection and community. The journalist Johann Hari has written several books on addiction, and he is also well known for a TED Talk that he gave called Everything You Think You Know About Addiction is Wrong. In this TED Talk, Johann Hari makes a bold comment regarding addiction and also what is the opposite of addiction when he states, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. This dramatic declaration that the opposite of addiction is connection is an amazing statement. And when considered closely, it appears there is much truth to this statement as well. This perspective is also supported by what is called the Rat Park Experiment. I first heard of this Rat Park Experiment by Christy, who was the speaker at a local faith-based recovery meeting. And I also heard of the quote that the opposite of addiction is connection from Amy B. from an earlier podcast interview. The Rat Park Experiment of the 1970s by Dr. Bruce K. Alexander presented a study that indicated a completely different perspective on addiction. The Rat Park Experiment of the 70s had two main parts. For part one, the Rat Park Experiment was configured such that the test rats were kept in isolation, all alone by themselves in small cages, but with two options for water. One water bottle was combined with an addictive drug, and the other bottle was pure water. Throughout the experiment, the isolated rats continually chose the water that included the drugs. The rats continued to drink the drug-infused water until they eventually overdosed and died. For part two, the Rat Park Experiment was configured differently such that the test rats were placed in cages about 200 times larger than the original isolation cages. Various stimulation devices such as toys and balls and wheels and plenty of food were provided. Also, each cage did not have only one rat, but 20 rats were added to this larger cage, both male and female rats. The same two water bottles were added to this new larger cage. The one bottle combined with an addictive drug and the other simply pure water. The rats in this new larger cage with many other rats did not become addicted to the drug-infused water. Instead, the rats largely avoided the drug-infused water. They were more interested in what you might call typical rat behavior in their community and doing normal rat activities, such as playing and eating and mating. So there was indeed quite a contrast between part one of the experiment, when the test rats were all alone in a small cage and eventually then became addicted and died, compared to part two when the test rats were not alone but were joined with 20 other rats in a much larger cage. The rats in the larger cage, in a community of other rats, did not become addicted, but rather seemed to be more interested in typical rat behavior in the rat park. As an aside, for your reference, many of these details were taken from the publication Psychology Today, dated September 30th, 2015, in an article by Dr. Robert Weiss. Certainly there are many components of addiction, and while there are many other factors to consider beyond this Rat Park experiment, it does suggest that connection and community are important factors regarding addiction, and that the importance of connection also impacts us humans as well. For me, it seems that this study does reflect the importance of connection, of the social connection, of community, and of the human connection. It indicates the importance of relationship, the importance of relationship in many different ways, through connection with people individually, and in groups, and even in larger communities. It is not surprising, then, that the Bible also has much to say about relationship and connection. God has created us human beings as relational beings, as beings where relationship is so important. God himself is a God that desires a relationship with us. God has made us humans where relationship and connection is so important. Consider, for example, how you feel when your relationship is not right with your spouse, or your mom or dad, or your brother or sister, or your best friend, or even with your coworkers at work. When these relationships are not right, we are out of balance. We are not ourselves, and we do not make wise decisions. And then with all of that together, it is reasonable to see that if our relationship with God is not right, that will also have a big impact on us and how we live and the decisions we make. If our relationship with God is not right, or if we do not have any relationship with God at all, then that is what is called the empty hole that only God can fill. If we do not have a relationship with God, we will seek to fill that God-sized hole with all kinds of things, such as drugs or alcohol or sex or money or greed or power and many, many other things. But nothing else can fill this empty hole that only God can fill, that only a relationship with God can fill. For me, it is quite reasonable to accept that human connection and human relationships are important components to help people be successful in recovery. For me, as I look at some of the ways people are able to be successful in recovery, most of them include some aspect of relationship and connection. So with that, let me make three main points as we look further at the importance of relationship and connection. First, the importance of relationship and connection is foundational to the Bible. Even from the beginning of the Bible in Genesis, it is quite clear that God made mankind such that relationships are critical for people. Genesis chapter 2, verse 18 says, "And the Lord God said, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him." And even how Jesus taught us to pray is a very relational way, calling God our Father. Matthew chapter 6, verse 9, "In this manner, therefore, pray, Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name." Jesus also demonstrated the importance of relationship and community when he chose the small group structure, if you will, of the apostles. Luke chapter 6, verse 13 says, "And when day came, he called his disciples and chose from them 12, whom he named apostles." The Old and New Testaments are full of instruction and encouragement to fellowship together, such as in Hebrews 10, verses 24 and 25. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. And then certainly the most dramatic relationship possible is that God would send his very own Son into the world to live among us so that we could have an eternal relationship with God in heaven, so that we could have the most important relationship of all, a relationship with God. John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life." The Bible is full of the importance of relationship, us with others and with God as well. And then second, AA and NA have absolutely embraced the importance of relationship and community as well as foundational to the AA and NA fellowships. Meeting daily or weekly with other individuals in recovery builds community. Meeting in a face-to-face environment helps strengthen community in a way that isolation or even online or remote community cannot match. Friendships, sponsor and sponsee relationships, and community are all developed and provide a protection from addiction that is quite strong, such that both of these fellowships reduce isolation and encourage community. The AA book, page 276, describes connection and relationship like this: "There is no more aloneness with that awful ache so deep in the heart of every alcoholic that nothing before could ever reach it. That ache is gone and never need return. Now there is a sense of belonging, of being wanted and needed and loved. In return for a bottle and a hangover, we have been given the keys of the kingdom." And then also from the AA book, page 336, says this: "I found everything I had ever looked for in Alcoholics Anonymous. I used to thank God for putting AA in my life. Now I thank AA for putting God in my life. I found my tribe, the social architecture that fulfills my every need for camaraderie and conviviality. I learned how to live." And then lastly, number 3, AA and NA actually blend both of these principles together with the importance of relationship and community and connection combined with the importance of a spiritual experience with God. In AA and NA, the focus on relationship and community is critical to these groups. And that is why they are called fellowships, because the aspect of relationship and community is so important. The Narcotics Anonymous book, page 94, states, "Surrendering our will puts us in contact with a higher power who fills the empty place inside that nothing could ever fill. We learned to trust God for help daily. Living just for today relieves the burden of the past and the fear of the future. We learn to take whatever actions are necessary to leave the results in the hands of our higher power." The Narcotics Anonymous program is spiritual. We strongly suggest that members make an attempt to find a higher power of their understanding. Yes, it is clear the importance of relationship and connection and community are critical to us as humans. And the most important relationship is the one we have with God. For you personally, if your relationship with God is not right, that will definitely impact all of your other relationships. I encourage you today to consider your relationship with God. Continue to draw close to God in prayer and continue to seek His will in your life. And if you have not yet made that decision, like the decision of step 3, I encourage you to consider step 3 of recovery that says, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Make a decision today for God by grace through faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. It is with this decision that you can have the most important relationship of all, a relationship with God. Life will not be perfect, but it will be the start of a brand new life. It is with God in your life that you can fill the empty hole inside that only God can fill. And it is with God in your life that you can indeed be successful in recovery. I encourage you today to consider bringing God into your life for the most important relationship of all, a relationship with God. That is what I have for you today. Thank you very much for joining me today. And remember, there is always hope with God. Take care, and God bless you all.